Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the Alliance for Aging Research, I'd like to welcome you to today's stakeholder briefing, Patient Access at Risk, Real World Impact and Future Concerns about the Inflation Reduction Act's pill penalty. My name is Sue Peshin, and I serve as the president and CEO of the Alliance for Aging Research, and we're the leading nonprofit organization dedicated to changing the narrative to achieve healthy aging and equitable access to care. Just so folks know, we are recording today's webinar, and the recording is going to be made publicly available. We're here today to examine the data, to build awareness and ignite action about a specific IRA drug price setting provision that's known as the pill penalty. We're going to review the latest data on its negative impacts to biopharma investment, research and development, and the broader implications for patient access to care and current and future treatment options. So, just to level set, the pill penalty refers to a provision in the IRA that exempted FDA approved small molecule drugs from price controls for just 9 years while giving large molecule biologics 13 years of protection. So, this is the period before they can be considered for what CMS calls direct negotiation, but we call price controls and price setting. If you saw the list of the first 10 Part D drugs that were selected for direct negotiation, they were all small molecule drugs. And small molecule drugs come in the form of pills, capsules, or tablets that your local pharmacy usually fills for pickup or delivery. And in most cases, patients can take a small molecule treatment at home with a glass of water. And most known medicines today are small molecule, and tens of millions of patients rely on them every single day. Large molecule biologic medications are usually infused through an IV line that's put into a vein or an injection. Most biologics require administration by a clinician at a doctor's office or in a hospital outpatient setting. So patients have to schedule appointments to receive their medication, and they have to have transportation in order to get there. And once there, it can take anywhere from several minutes to hours to receive an injection or infusion, depending on the medication. And biologics are especially used to treat many types of cancer, as well as diseases of the immune system, such as rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, and lupus. Both types of these medications, small and large molecule, are extremely important, but you can easily see that there's differences between them and why we need both. And that's why we're worried that Congress included this 4-year gap between when each of these drug categories could be considered for direct negotiation. And we don't really think it's Congress's remit to determine incentives for which types of future treatments options are available for patients and doctors. And we don't necessarily think that was their original intent, but that's how their legislative efforts ended up. And there's research to show that this pill penalty is going to substantially reduce small molecule treatment options in the coming decades. Now, not every problem has an easy solution, but this one thankfully does, and we're going to talk about it today. It's a legislative fix known as the Ensuring Pathways to Innovative Cures Act, or EPIC Act for short. And the bill has bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate, which we all know is a little bit more unusual than usual these days. So that's really good. And we're going to learn more about it here today. So thanks to everybody for being here, and let's get started. We are really excited to be joined by a panel of esteemed experts today, and I'm going to introduce them in just a moment. But I want to make sure, do we have Congressman Davis here? Oh, we do. Yay. Hi. I'm so thrilled that you're here. So let me introduce you. So Congressman Don Davis is the representative of North Carolina's first district. He's a fifth generation Eastern North Carolinian who's a veteran educator, minister, and dedicated public servant. And he is one of the co-sponsors of the Ensuring Pathways to Innovative Cures Act. And we're blessed to have him here today to tell us more about this bill and what we can do to support its passage. Congressman Davis, thank you so much for being here, and welcome.
Well, hello, everyone, and hello, Sue. To your remarks, one of the few, it seems, bipartisan bills that we have going on in midst of everything that's happening in the world today. It's a pleasure to speak with this group, the IRA pill penalty stakeholder briefing today. To be a part of this, I want to thank Susan, Sally, Peter, John, in particular, for making this event possible. And thank each and every one of you for joining in today. I enjoyed also virtually joining last month the Cancer Support Community's annual RA Summit. Thought that was a great effort there and really appreciate being a part of that. I'm also glad to be here as each and every one of us, we're all on the front line, so to speak, here. When we talk about creating access to life saving and cutting edge healthcare treatments, it's so important for us to be here. Let me just share a little bit about myself. 22 counties I represent in Eastern North Carolina, the largest geographic congressional district in the state right now, 22 counties, 100% rural. I'm from Eastern North Carolina. I was born, raised here, went on. My mom transferred with IBM to Irving, Texas. So we went to Texas, graduated there in high school, and from there went to the Air Force Academy. Served 8 years active duty. I was able to make my way back to Eastern North Carolina. But let me share with you. So I took the uniform off and decided to file for office because I wanted to make a difference in my hometown. And I ran for mayor. I was elected mayor, went on to get reelected, and I went on from there to the state senate. And I just want to share this one story because I'm sure you have a great appreciation for this. So I was in the state senate and I just gotten elected good, and it was time to pick committee assignments. So realizing the importance of healthcare, education, agriculture, especially in our part of the state, I decided to put healthcare committee down. And lo and behold, I've received the committee assignments, and healthcare was on it. So I remember still to this day clearly walking to the healthcare committee meeting room in Raleigh, and I said, wow, this must be going to be the easiest work because everybody, we must agree on healthcare. Everybody wants to help people. And while it could be far from the truth, I've since serving 12 years on the healthcare committee in North Carolina, championing efforts like rare diseases and so forth. Went on to get elected to serve now in the United States House of Representatives. And I can tell you, I'm on the Ag and Armed Services Committee. However, most of our bills are dealing with healthcare, and it's because of the nature of the district that we're serving. We tend to have so many healthcare disparities, just so many challenges from infant mortality, chronic illnesses, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, even to life expectancy. I'm saying all this to say that's why it has been so important to me to roll up the sleeves, to go to work, to work beyond the fussing and fighting in Washington, D.C., to join forces with people like Dr. Greg Murphy. Now, Dr. Murphy and I actually had history. We both served in the North Carolina General Assembly, and he decided to go to, after Representative Jones passed, he ran for the seat and went to D.C. This is not our first time, nor do I believe it'll be our last time teaming up on what I think is important legislation, and that is H.R. 1492, the EPIC Act. And thank you so much for your interest in this. And when we talk about the EPIC Act, we know that investments drive life-saving cures, and we have to be mindful then about investments, how investments are made or not made in this case. And when we talk about the pill penalty, the other thing that we just have to be honest about is the IRA. There are some definitely good components, but we also know there's an I best categorize as an unintended consequence that we're now dealing with. When we talk about this pill penalty, and ultimately another reason that this is so important to me to roll up the sleeves and go to work on an issue like this is because so often in rural communities, I mean, there are challenges that are before us, such as dealing with driving distances and so forth. And if we can have a therapy, a treatment that's available to our families here in the East that can help them, I think we should keep all options on the table and not take options off because, again, of the unique challenges that are facing many rural communities and families. So, when we talk about penalizing these groundbreaking therapies, I don't think that is the intent, nor should it be the intent of Congress. And that's why I think it's so important to join forces in a bipartisan way to come to the table and to be clear and to be in this fight for our families. And it was the same thing when we look at the orphan cures, looking over the reconciliation process, and we were able to send a strong bipartisan message there too. Again, as we're talking about rare diseases and so forth. So we're going to continue to stay engaged in this space. And I think the conversations that are going to take place today are so, so important. I mean, we need the Orphan Cures Act, and it is law now. And let me share the importance of why we make it bipartisan, why it has to be bipartisan, is we often see these major swings from election cycle to election cycle. And when we're able to join forces this way, then it means it's less likely to come under attack. And even right now, there's some pushback if we're being candid, and we're going to keep pushing back to defend orphan. But we want to make sure that we're advancing fundamentally good policy. Same thing with old drugs, new cures. I mean, we have to advance good policy and do it in a bipartisan way. So, Sue, thank you so much for allowing me this space, this opportunity to engage. And it's such an honor to be able to be a champion with Dr. Murphy in this space. And thank you for the panelists, everybody, and for all the amazing work that will take place today. Have a wonderful, wonderful summit.
Congressman Davis, do you have just like 2 minutes for a couple of questions if folks have? And if people want to put their cameras on, you're welcome to. I have a question myself, which is what's the most helpful thing that advocacy organizations can do to support the EPIC Act, and what do you think the prospects are for, getting this done?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that can be done is to actually allow our voices to come together and to advocate and make sure that we're touching. I mean, if you have not reached out to your member of Congress, your House member, your senators, and engaged in these conversations, we're already behind. We need all hands on deck right now. Make those touches, share real stories, talk about the impact investment, talk about here it is, the impact of not doing it. What happens if we don't? Let's talk about the realities of the research. It takes so much that goes into getting things, even moving forward. And just again, the realities of investors, that mindset and that perspective. And, that has been so moving for me as a member of Congress. And I understand my colleagues. And then the last thing I would say is don't give up, continue to engage in conversations. I can tell you this, and I know this. I have some colleagues who are perhaps on the fence. They are supportive and would love to jump on board, but also we have to just be honest about the reality of the other side. I mean, I'm a military person, and we have what's called guidon bearers. The guidon bearer is the one that carries the flag, and sometimes they're often the one that was shot at first going into war. so I kind of hate to say it this way and talk this way, but For me, this was a mantle, a flag worth taking on. But you have a lot of others who are with us on this, but they're just hesitant because of having to deal with the optics and the other side. But they are fundamentally with us. Continue to have the conversations engaged with everyone because it will make a difference.
That's awesome. That's great advice. And, we'll check in with your team that works with you to get a little bit more insight on that. And happy to, give folks a reason to carry the flag with you. Uh,
I
so,
love that, Sue. See there?
anybody else have a closing question for Congressman Davis? I know you have a super busy day. Anything else?
Got
Okay,
little
thank you
things,
so
few
much,
little
sir.
things going on and shut down and trade. But thank
Yes.
y'all. Have a great one.
Okay.
We appreciate
Take
your time.
care.
All righty.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
All right. That was cool. Okay, so we have an amazing panel, and our first speaker on the panel is going to be Duane Schulthess, who is the CEO of Vital Transformation. And Vital Transformation is an economics consultancy based in Brussels, Belgium, and Washington, D.C., that focuses on the healthcare and biopharma sectors. Mr. Schulthess's recent 2025 research publication was titled The Inflation Reduction Act's Impact Upon Early Stage Venture Capital Investments, and it's played a pivotal role in the Trump administration's decision to sign an executive order to amend the legislation's pill penalty. So, Duane, thank you so much for being here, and we all look forward to hearing about your research.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Sue. It's great to be here myself. It's a real pleasure and an honor. Again, thanks a lot. I just want to make sure, can you all see the presentation? It's up. We're all good? Okay. I'm just going to walk through the publication that you just introduced. Again, if anyone is interested, here's the title, and you can find this. It's open access, so you can download it and source it and do whatever you want. And of course, if you have any questions, by all means, please feel free to reach out. You can get our contact details from the publication, and Sue and everyone will give them to you. Okay, a little bit of a background here. How did I get into this business? How did my background is in economics and data science. I'm a computer science major as an undergrad, and I used to work for the Wall Street Journal. And I was at the Journal in Europe. I was the head of corporate development. And we noticed something happening during the subprime mortgage crisis going back to 2007 through 2009. And if you looked at what was going on, the general S&P 500, it dropped quite significantly. But what was interesting is the biotech index during the subprime crisis did not drop. It actually maintained value. In fact, it performed 50% better than the overall broad market. Now, what we started seeing coming out of COVID or coming into COVID is this segmentation that we saw where the biotech sector and biopharma sector performed better in this index fund. It actually didn't. It started doing worse than the market. And this was around the time that the Inflation Reduction Act started getting introduced. First is the Build Back Better agenda or the Build Back Better Act. And then obviously when the deal was struck between Manchin and Chuck Schumer and everybody, it came back as the Inflation Reduction Act. And you can see that as the bill was introduced in essentially the fall of 2021 before it was voted on, and it looked like, well, it did pass the House. You can see that there's a significant reversion in the biotech index. And this caught our attention because we saw this change and we were monitoring it. We saw something was different this time. So what did we do? We decided, a couple of years ago to pull a data set. And this was in early 2024. We pulled 1,137 clinical trials out of clinicaltrials.gov. And we decided to focus on small companies in an early stage. Now, why was that? Because we figured that the venture capital community would be the first ones to react to the disincentives of the Inflation Reduction Act. And Sue mentioned in her introduction that this 9-year versus 13-year incentive, basically that reduces the return on investment by about a half, well, somewhere around half. So if you have a failure rate of around 90%, and then you're cramming down the profitability by another half, we thought we would see the early stage investors start to take that change in their behavior. And if you look at these two classes, neurology and autoimmune diseases, you can see that there's a complete revision away from small molecules, new molecular entities, NMEs. That's the technical term for small molecules. We see that in 2024, when we pulled this data in 2020, by 2023 already, you were seeing companies pivot away from small molecules to large molecules. Now, for neurology, this is a problem because there's a thing called the blood-brain barrier, and you want small molecules to pass the blood-brain barrier. They do so far more effectively. So when we started seeing this change in this class of neurology to all large molecules, this really got our interest. So we had this data set of 1,137 clinical trials. We said, okay, let's focus on the lead assets, the assets of these clinical trials, these lead indications, and see if we can detect a change of behavior by exposure to Medicare before and after the introduction of IRA. Is IRA acting as a disincentive? So what do we see? Well, we're looking at small and large molecules. There's where IRA gets introduced. We're looking at these 161 lead assets in phase 1 and 2. We restricted to phase 1 and 2 because, again, we're looking for the ability where investors are going to have a change of heart and can pivot. Phase 3 is very difficult. You're sort of in for a penny, in for a pound at that point. You're kind of stuck. So, but you can pivot in phase 1 and phase 2. And what do we see? Well, we see quite a significant drop from the peak in small molecules that occurred between 2020 and 2021, particularly coming with the introduction of the Inflation Reduction Act and small molecules. It's quite marked. But boy, oh boy, you see a huge jump in biologics, an enormous jump, 6 times. So basically, what we see now is biologics in this early stage class of investments, pre-IRA, post-IRA. Right now, biologics are 10 times the investment we see in small molecules broadly after the IRA in this early stage investment class. Now, again, this is the data set that was extracted in August of 2024. So going in a little bit more here, we looked at all of these indications, these 244 investments that were associated with these lead assets. And what do we see? A certain amount of these investments are specifically targeting Medicare. So these are exposures to Medicare above the median point in our population. Now, that's a very technical term, but essentially the midpoint of exposure to Medicare, if it's above that, we call that high exposure. And if it's below that, we call it low exposure. So we said, let's just look at what's going on with these indications with a higher exposure where half of our population or more would be exposed to Medicare with this drug and this indication. And what do we see? We see a 74% drop in the size of investments at the median. Now, that's really significant. And particularly drops of that size at the median, you might see them at the mean, at the average, but at the median, that's a really hard point to move. And so when you see drops of that size, that's really quite striking. And things like non-small cell lung cancer, we see a very large drop. We see a drop in Alzheimer's disease. There was one drug going into a phase 3 from phase 2 that, unfortunately, I hate to say, that small molecule did fail. So the data in Alzheimer's disease is certainly impacted by that one asset. But you can see here, diseases that we would associate of aging, prostate cancer, for example, we see a very, very large fall off in investments before and after IRA. So we looked at this by low and high exposure by small and large molecules. So we have small molecules with a low exposure to Medicare by indication, and we have small molecules with a high exposure to Medicare by indication. What do we see? The small molecules with a high exposure to Medicare drop statistically in the size of investments after IRA. We see that. The small molecules with a low exposure to Medicare, they do not drop statistically after IRA. So we see investors fundamentally changing their behavior based on the exposure to Medicare with small molecules. And as Sue said earlier, the vast majority of the drugs that were negotiated were small molecules. In fact, when we did all the work on HR3, Nancy Pelosi's pricing bill, the sort of forerunner of IRA, we found that over 70% of the assets that would have been trapped in the HR3 negotiation, they were all small molecules. So overwhelmingly, IRA is going to impact assets in small molecules. And we see investors here have changed their behavior. Interestingly enough, and I have to say, we were surprised by this. This was not what we expected. We do not see that in biologics. So we would expect people to be a little more cagey, even in the biologics, because 13 years is much shorter than what we normally see in biologics. Generally, you have 20 or 21 years on market with biologics. And we can, that's another discussion for another panel, I suppose, if that's right or wrong. But the reality is it's about 20 years-ish for biologics, but we don't see any segmentation there at all statistically. There's nary a difference. It was 59% exposure before IRA, 59% of the cohort had Medicare exposure before IRA, and 59% after IRA. There was no change in the rate of exposure by investment before and after the introduction of IRA. It was quite shocking and quite surprising, but there you go. Biologics, investors see biologics after the introduction of IRA as a more stable and better investment class. Now, what's also interesting is you can crank up exposure in small molecules. You can take a small molecule versus high and low exposure, and you can crank up exposure to IRA, and we see roughly a half fall, 50% drop across the entire curve as you crank up the exposure to the Inflation Reduction Act above the median exposure. So the more exposure you get, the less value you're getting, the smaller the investments are getting, and the curve is pretty much, the distribution is pretty equal at about a minus half. You lose about 50% of the value across the whole curve. So solutions. Get rid of the pill penalty, make everything 13 years. You're going to get about 20-25% of investment back. If you go to 15 years, you get closer to 30-40% back, 25-30% back. That 15 years would be great. Probably not going to happen. I think that's too heavy of a lift. So you're probably going to get about 15-20% back, 20% back if you pass the EPIC Act and you remove the pill penalty. So that's where we're at. Conclusions quickly. We've seen 35% reduction, statistically significant shift away from several indications: Alzheimer's disease, non-small cell lung cancer, head and neck cancer, renal cancer. Shifts and develops as small molecules away from indications targeting Medicare. And removing the pill penalty would give you about 20% improvement. If you go to 15 years, you get 50% back. So I'll leave it at that. I'm sure there's plenty of questions, and there's certainly other great speakers, and I don't want to monopolize the time too much. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Sue.
That was great, Duane. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions before we go on to Peter? And I know we have some at the end in case when we open up the discussion at the end. I think it's really interesting that if you remove the provision, then you're just going to get an upswing 20-25%. That's what you said?
Yeah, because the vast majority, the small molecules, you're going to get a bit out of small molecules, but you're still losing a lot of revenue out of large molecules. So you get about half back if you get to 15 years, but you're still chopping a lot of revenue out of the market.
This is really good. I think that it would be useful for us to figure out like the key statistics to pull out of this and start using in some of our advocacy materials. So thank you for this work.
So it's our pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so our next speaker is Peter Rubin. He is the executive director for No Patient Left Behind, which is a nonprofit dedicated to creating and maintaining patient access to affordable prescription drugs. With more than 20 years of health policy, strategic advocacy, and public affairs experience, Mr. Rubin has held senior level positions spanning public and private sector payers, innovators, and regulators. And Peter's going to walk us through the economics behind the pill penalty and how recent cuts to research and development are negatively impacting patient access. Peter, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Sue, and thank you, Duane, for the excellent presentation. And obviously, thank Congressman Davis for his tremendous leadership on this issue. Coincidentally, I was speaking with some specialist investors and biotech entrepreneurs from North Carolina last week, and all they wanted to talk about was when and how are we going to get rid of the pill penalty. So it's a big deal that the congressman's out there fighting for this very, very important fix. In terms of MPLB, we're really a coalition of small biopharmas and the investors who fund them, and the patient advocates who rely on them for the next generation of innovative medicines. We actually absolutely believe that it's possible to achieve biotech affordability and innovation through three guiding principles, which is that one, if a doctor prescribes a treatment and the insurer authorizes it, it should be affordable to the patient. Two, that drugs should go generic without undue delay. And three, that there should be sufficient innovation incentives to ensure that there's market pricing during that core patent intended period. So that's how we think we can achieve biotech affordability and innovation. And why we care so much about the pill penalty is because it really undermines innovation by allowing price controls for small molecule drugs 4 years earlier than for biologics. And the practical impact of that is that it reduces investment, delays generics, and it also raises our long-term healthcare costs. So fixing the penalty actually protects patients, strengthens the generic pipeline, and lowers system-wide spending over time. And just to echo what Sue mentioned in the beginning, is that pills are patient-friendly ways, treatments that benefit society. Even though pills and shots, being biologics, are just as risky to innovate, pills actually are easier to take at home. So as Shu mentioned, you don't need a doctor or a physician administered the shot like they do with Part B drugs. They're easily genericizable, and pills are also interchangeable at the pharmacy. So generic pills save billions because they're cheap to make and simple to use. And by the way, the pills covered under Part D are covered by Medicare's out-of-pocket cap, whereas Part B biologics/shots are not. So the IRA is actually incentivizing innovations that won't even be covered by the very important insurance reform of the out-of-pocket cap. So do you want to mention that, yes, innovation depends on predictable incentives. We want innovators and biofarmers to follow the science, not arbitrary rules. This structural disadvantage for small molecules is having a real impact, and it's actually changing the rules midway through the game, which is, as you're seeing the sort of the phase 3 small molecules get over the finish line, but where it's really making that big impact is when it comes to early stage investments and phase 1 and phase 2, where you're seeing a real shift away from small molecules. And what's frustrating is that the modelers, when it comes to the Congressional Budget Office and a lot of critics of the biopharma industry, really don't understand that the consequence of the pill penalty is that one, you're going to see fewer generics and higher long-term costs, because when you have fewer innovation medicines, you have fewer generics. Secondly, if you take away the incentive to to make incremental innovations, do meaningful upgrades of existing drugs, there's also going to be less utility for innovative medicines. And then lastly, you're going to see fewer generics, not only because you're going to see fewer brand medications, but also you're going to see the IRA actually lowers the reward for generics challenging innovators by price controlling drugs, small molecules, 9 years after approval, well prior to their patents expiring. The potential reward for generics to challenge those patents is decreased significantly. So generics are actually going to have to pick and choose which drugs they actually want to copy in the future and challenge, versus today where they actually take a lot of swings. So if you have less brand competition, fewer cures, and if you are discouraging post-approval research, you basically are going to have a lot of off-label prescribing versus a lot of the sort of R&D that allows for drugs like Keytruda to have multiple indications across many cancers. And lastly, so I think the way you fix all this is, one, in terms of improving innovation modeling, we just hope that the CBO and others would actually talk to the investors and the innovators who are making real-time forward-looking investment decisions based off of the environment versus, reaching out to folks who just look retrospectively from a generalist perspective. And then obviously, looking for ways to, to fix the pill penalty. We want to protect that generic competition, and then incentivize, once again, those follow-on treatments before price controls begin.
Thank you, Peter. This was great. Any questions on what Peter spoke about before we move on to our next speaker? Peter, I think the insight that you guys have from your perch in just kind of the wider lens is really good for us as the patient out strictly patient advocacy groups to understand and learn, and how connected it is. I think a lot of times we remove ourselves from the deciding side, the innovation side, the investment side, and it's sort of part and parcel. Like, we're not going to get these innovations, we're not going to get new treatments if, we don't have proper protections, if we don't have proper incentives. And so it behooves us to learn about these issues and engage in them, for
Thank you
sure.
so thank you so much, Sue.
Yeah. Okay, so our next speaker is Sally Werner, and she serves as CEO of the Cancer Support Community, which is a global nonprofit dedicated to uplifting and strengthening people impacted by cancer by providing support, fostering compassionate communities, and breaking down barriers to care. With more than 25 years of leadership in oncology, nursing, and health administration, Sally brings deep expertise in both clinical and operational domains across diverse healthcare systems, including nonprofit advocacy. And for a lot of folks, we associate small molecule drugs with cancer therapies. So really want to hear from you about how oncology research and development is being impacted by the pill penalty and what you're hearing from your community. And Sally, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Sue, and thank you to the other panelists. Great conversation today. So I will highlight, as Sue said in my bio, I've been in the cancer space for 28 years now. And as an oncology nurse, I can remember when cancer care was administered only in the hospital for days and weeks. And then we finally moved out to outpatient infusion. And now with the introduction of oral oncolytics, cancer patients, their caregivers, their family members have a lot riding on the EPIC Act and the pill penalty. Innovation, especially as we start to see some of the cancer incidents creep up a little bit, especially in young adults, is critical to help patients live longer, survive their cancer, and have options as they do so. So I'll just highlight a few things in cancer care specifically about small molecule drug treatments. So number one, it allows patients to take their medication at home or in a convenient location, and that flexibility is tantamount. It can make things more affordable. It can make their treatment better tolerated, and other alternative forms of treatment, such as infusions, which must be administered by a healthcare provider, definitely create some logistical barriers. I'll add that the ability for small molecule drugs to be taken at home alleviates the administrative, right, financial and logistical burdens on patients and their loved ones and their caregivers. We run a cancer support helpline. The number one call that we receive is support with transportation and housing for cancer care. So as you can imagine, with oral oncolytics, we alleviate a lot of those barriers. Next, I want to talk just a little bit about the specific patients, caregivers, family members that oral oncolytics have a great impact on. We've already heard earlier today from the Congressman on the impact for rural communities. We also see the impact for urban health deserts. And so these are locations where there's less access to pharmacies and health centers, and patients can be burdened by longer travel times to receive their necessary care. And so, as you can imagine, taking an oral chemotherapeutic agent really alleviates having to get to that pharmacy, to the health center. We've also heard from our senior population, from older adults, that they have a strong preference for medications that can be taken at home. When asked to rank the importance of benefits that a new treatment offers, 91% of our respondents in a survey indicating that being able to take medicine at home was important to extremely important to them. And then last but not least, for those of you that aren't familiar with cancer care and oncology care and small molecule drugs, I'll just remind everyone that it holds a unique clinical benefit because of the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier and reach medicine targets inside of cells, providing significant benefit for patients with cancer, including other conditions as well, neurodegenerative conditions and other complex conditions that are impacting our older Americans and rural communities. We just held our Cancer Support Community third annual IRA Summit, and I'll just share a couple of call to actions in advocacy. Number one, we really feel that there needs to be more meaningful patient engagement throughout the policy decision and implementation process. And so one of our calls to action was to have CMS establish a formal liaison program to engage with patient advocacy organizations. And patient advocacy organizations, we know, is patient and caregiver voice. We want CMS to better understand the real world impact and downstream effects of policies, and we think we can accomplish that through a liaison program. We sign letters frequently. We initiate letters frequently. And recently we sent 2 sign-on letters to congressional leadership and CMS with over 60 signatories, including cancer, arthritis, HIV, mental health, and other chronic disease patient advocacy organizations. And so for us, this really highlights the importance of patient engagement and proactively addressing the ongoing implementation when it comes to life-saving and life-enhancing treatment. And I will turn it back over to Sue.
Sally, that was great. I actually have a question for you. I know you all are very supportive of vaccines, and especially because your community is immunocompromised when they're going through treatment. And I was just thinking about that in relation to having to go to a doctor's office or having to go to a hospital outpatient clinic. You want to obviously direct people to the best medication for them. And in a lot of cases, that's where they're supposed to go to get it. But can you speak a little bit to that and just how it's, the idea that innovation in oral, I think you call them oncolytics, would impede on that?
Yeah. I think when you think about the time burden for cancer patients with how much time they spend at the provider's office, getting to and from provider's office infusion. And so I would say similar to that with vaccines, everything in cancer care is a conversation with your doctor, right? About what's best for you, what's right for you, any comorbidities you may have. And so certainly that time burden is being studied intensely in oncology care right now because of sub-Q infusions as well as subcutaneous, I'll say the full word, as well as oral oncolytics. So big impact in oncology. And some of the vaccine conversation and controversy has also had impact on messenger RNA studies going on in cancer care. And so there's definitely a difference between therapeutic vaccines and preventative vaccines. And so we're keeping a close eye on that as well in the advocacy space.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. No, I appreciate all of that. And I was also just trying to get at, we're going into respiratory season and cancer patients are at, higher risk because they do have delicate immune systems if they are going through treatments. So I would think that it's safer for them to be able to take medications at home if they can, that's like another benefit.
Yeah. And every survey we've conducted, that is definitely their preference.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. This was super insightful. Appreciate it. All right. Well, our last speaker on our panel, and then we're going to open it up and have everybody come back to answer any questions that you all have and discussion, is John Stanford. And John is the founder and executive director of Incubate, the national organization of venture capital firms, so the folks who actually invest, united to support early stage life science innovation. And in this role, he serves as the go-to advisor for VCs and biotech executives navigating the intersection of investment, policy, and market dynamics. John is widely recognized as the definitive voice shaping the conversation around biotech innovation, drug pricing, and intellectual property, both in the US and globally. So from your vantage point, John, at this intersection with science and investment, how are you seeing the impact of the pill penalty play out across the landscape?
Well, thanks for having me, Sue. It's incredible work you continue to do, and great to be in front of patient advocates who, as someone said earlier, whose voice isn't heard enough or consulted enough. And I think it's critically important that everyone on the phone gets involved. So great to be here. As mentioned, Incubate's really the voice of sort of the National Trade Association for Life Science Venture Capital. And it's always good to start with reminding folks who VC is, and the way sort of different sectors have broken down. Some bets are just too risky for traditional financial actors, banks, and other investors. And biotech is absolutely one of that. We're talking about an industry where 9 in 10 projects fail. If you've done really well, you fail 9 out of 10 times. And so venture casts a wide array of bets, hoping that a few of them, or even just one of them out of a portfolio, really is a home run. And those home runs, not only are they financially beneficial, but they're also life-changing to patients. And so that's critically important. And it's been a very tough time for life science venture capital for a whole host of reasons. But it's critical more and more. I just spent all week in Boston with VCs, and policy has become their number one concern. 10 years ago, it wasn't navigating policy, it was navigating the science. And I don't think there's anything more representative of policy getting in the way of science than the EPIC Act. Duane is 10 times more brilliant than I am, but I will just say Incubate's own studies, our life science investment tracker, our surveys of biotech CEOs and VCs all point to the same conclusions that he so eloquently presented. We are investing less in small molecules, and it is explicitly because of the pill penalty. We think we're very clear about that. We created a life science tracker that looks at official statements of companies into the SEC. So these are statements that carry criminal penalties if you're lying on them. And company after company after company has said, we're shuttering our small molecule program because of the pill penalty, because of the IRA. And so this is one of those times where we don't have to wait 10 years to see the unexpected or unintended consequence. It was frankly pretty expected from when we saw the differential. And the last thing I'll add, so I don't want to be repetitive of Duane and Peter, who shared some really great data. I think just sort of reflecting of why this is so impactful to us. When we're making an investment, we're looking at 3 things. We're looking at how much money does a company need today, measured in tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. We're looking at the scientific likelihood of success, and we're looking at the ability that if everything goes right, can we recoup that investment and generate a return? And as I often say to people who are skeptical of some of these returns, if I told you 1,000% return on a medicine, how would you react to that? And many people say, well, that's a problem. That's too much. But then when 9 out of 10 are failing, we have to have that 10th medicine get to 1,000% just to break even. And unfortunately, what 9 years does in the IRA is it cuts 50% of the likely revenues of a drug out of the picture. And so unfortunately, small molecules no longer justify that return in most cases. And that's what drove the data that Duane showed. So thrilled to be here. Please, please, please. I would be happy to hear any reason why not to support the EPIC Act. We've gotten bipartisan support. This is Incubate's number one priority, working with Democrats and Republicans. It was great to see Congressman Davis. So happy to answer any questions or hear from folks on that. But thanks again, Sue.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. I know that there are folks out there, so I think some primarily, I think in ivory tower perches, who oftentimes will say like, oh, this is hyperbole on the part of the industry. And, are there specific examples, anything that you guys know of that you can tell people here? We know for sure that this is happening in real time, other than the numbers.
I will jump in and drop a link in the chat. I have 55 specific research programs and 26 drugs, so I won't name them all. But, you look at Vir Biosciences, super innovative company, had products across a different set of modalities, and just closed their small molecule program. You have Alnylam that stopped a phase 3 trial right after the IRA and explicitly pointed to the IRA. Companies don't do that when it's hyperbole. That is not to say our industry has been immune from saying the sky is falling on any policy. There are some out there who definitely have done that. I think one of the things we went into the life science tracker doing is we know that sometimes we say the sky is falling and don't have examples to point to it. But it's great to see Sally on, because the number one area where our investors have pulled back is in small molecule cancer research. And it is a brutal reality that we have to address by ending the Epic Act.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Sally, go ahead.
I'll just add, John, I think you're absolutely right. We've seen that overall research is showing monthly post-approval oncology trials fell by 40%. Sharper declines, obviously, in small molecule drugs than for biologics. And when we saw Duane's slides up on the screen, you saw oncology topping those lists of drugs and studies. So,
If I could just say, Sue, and I completely agree with everything that everyone said so far. If you look at where the small molecule money is going now, and certainly John and Peter can address this too, I'm sure, you're seeing a move to cardiovascular disease. It's not just GLP-1s either. You're seeing, we're partying like it's 1999 again, pre-Medicare Part D, prescription drug benefit. And the other area you're seeing, and I got a lot of hate in social media one day when some of these big acquisitions started occurring in these neurological disorder drugs that we're seeing, which are small molecules. It's like, see, there's a lot of small molecules there. But these are for depression and schizophrenia. Depression, the phenotypical depression sufferer is an 18-year-old female, and the schizophrenia sufferer is a 24-year-old male. These are not Medicare age populations. And so you're seeing the mix moving to a much more early targeted population, very, very far away from the very, very far away from the Medicare age population. Yes, a certain percentage of people with Alzheimer's disease are going to have mental health issues, disorder, they're going to have aggression, and they're going to have, as all of us have dealt, many of us have dealt with Alzheimer's, irritability, depression, schizophrenia can creep in with Alzheimer's disease. These are known things. And yes, there will be some treatment there, no question, but the overwhelming size of the market is at the other side, well younger. And Peter, I'm just curious, from the conversations you folks have been having on the Hill, is anyone talking about the extra cost? Has anyone, we've quantified this internally for clients. We've not published anything, but where we are seeing moves into oncology for the Medicare age population, it's biologics now. Everything's pushing into Medicare Part B. And that's going to drive up costs. Now, some of our clients hate it when we say that, but that is the reality. That's going to increase costs.
Yeah.
So a few things. One, it's important to remember that prior to IRA's passage, half of the new oncology drugs that were approved by the FDA from 2018 to 2021 were small molecules. So, and you've seen consistently, whether it's investors and small biopharmas saying we can't raise money for small molecule projects, or our investors say, can you turn this small molecule idea into a large molecule idea? We actually all posted here in the chat sort of what we had 300 plus investors representing $320 billion worth of assets under management, 665 drugs in development, saying the small molecule penalty is impacting our investment decisions today that you won't see for many years to come. So, and then lastly, it is, there is sort of like that sort of academic chattering class that's like, oh, we hate biopharma. But even if the hatred outweighs like their love towards patients, quite frankly, and honestly, we're all going to be patients one day. And so what's frustrating is when you do see entities like CBO rely on these sort of retrospective academic analysis that are very generalist versus, hey, let's talk to the people who represent all of these drugs in development. How are they making their decisions in real time? And that's the frustration, and trying to convince CBO and others that you will see not just fewer new drugs, but less utility with those drugs, which results in a lot less generic competition, which is the only part of the healthcare system that goes generic. Providers, hospitals, health plans, PBMs all increase their fees over time. But once the patent is over for Entresto, that's a good forever for all patients in society.
Absolutely. Surgery never goes generic, right? Yeah.
And it never gets cheaper.
Yeah. Gretchen Wortman from the National Minority Equality Forum asked a really good question that I have been wondering myself, which is what was the original rationale for the differential that Congress set between the small and the large molecule exposure to drug negotiation?
I'm happy to take a swing at that. It's funny. I got a call right when the IRA was pretty close to done, of a Democratic office who is familiar with some trade negotiations, where usually industry fights for 5 years and 12 years, respectfully. And I'll clarify that in a second. And I remember them saying, "You got 9 and 13. You must be so excited." And it's a good example of showing that even people steeped in healthcare policy had trouble seeing sort of through the forest on this issue, because some of it comes down to what's exclusivity and what's a patent, and I will save that for a different sermon when I need to put everyone to bed. But basically, in our trade deals, we insist, going back about 20, 30 years, for 5 years of exclusivity for small molecule drugs and 12 years of something called regulatory data protection, RDP, for biologics. Some Hill staffers sort of misconstrued that because they ignored that in the US, a patent carries a 20-year term, and there are some other protections domestically. And so, to the best of our knowledge, the idea that you would separate small molecule and biologics was because it is separated in our trade deals, and that led to them creating this bifurcated schedule. I think also there's some belief that, oh, pills, they're cheap, they're easy, and the marginal cost of production is small, and biologics, because they're so fancy, have a higher marginal cost. And if you talk to the average staffer, that's what you would probably hear. And they're right. The next pill costs 10 cents, but the first pill costs $2 billion. And so there were just a lot of misconceptions about how drugs are developed. And I think that led to where we are. But it was our trade deals that took us down the wrong path here, and a little bit of how industry fought for biologics to come to market in the 2000s.
Really interesting. I've never heard that myself, so I really appreciate that. All right. Well, I want to thank our speakers. I hope everybody here joins me in that, and thank everybody for attending. And if you're here on behalf of a patient advocacy group, we urge you to keep EPIC top of mind in your legislative priorities. And if you're interested in getting involved, you can email us at info@agingresearch.org. Sally's group is also very active on this, as are No Patient Left Behind and Incubate. Please help spread the word, get other advocacy groups involved. We just partnered with the Global Coalition on Aging on one of these hyperlinks that you see, and we're going to send this around to all of you on a support letter. And many of you who are here signed that, so thank you. We really want to build a broad and diverse coalition of groups that support the EPIC Act and push for its passage to safeguard future innovation of treatments and provide access for older adults and really everyone across at all ages and stages. So thank you all for being here today, and we'll send out the link to the recording and ask you to help amplify, and have a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Same to you,
Thank you for the
Sue.
opportunity. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.